My name is James C. Earl Rockefeller III, originally born and raised in San Francisco, California's Western Addition neighborhood titled The Fillmore. The Fillmore was known as the Harlem of the West because of the jazz clubs that they had there. They got one of the oldest jazz clubs in the country in Fillmore, and also the concert venue called The Fillmore, where a lot of legendary artists and performers came to perform. I have a company called VJTV, the Visual Radio Network. It's a music, entertainment, television network, broadcasting music videos, celebrity interviews, concerts, and event coverage. I'm also a public address announcer for the Oakland Athletic League, Laney College, Merritt College, and also Stanford University.
The boom is in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
A public address announcer is event enhancement. My first taste of what we used to call Klan Leandro was back in 1986 when I started performing comedy. It was what we used to call it because we knew that once you crossed the Oakland border and you were driving, your hands had to be on 10 and 2. You made sure that you didn't have any warrants, made sure that your registration was correct, made sure that you had insurance. You know, it was just something that we heard from, some of the brothers in the neighborhood, because they was like, man, I was driving through Klan Leandro and I got followed 5 blocks, and you would just hear all of these stories about that. You would also hear that back in the day, and I don't know if it was a rumor or not, that they had the Ku Klux Klan in San Leandro, and we knew that San Leandro was like a vast majority of white folks. So we used to just call it Klan Leandro because it just fit. There was a comedy club out here called Tommy T's before it moved to Pleasanton. So I performed at Tommy T's several times, and then there was also a restaurant club right next to the Englander, and I did a lot of comedy performances there. So that was my first taste of coming to San Leandro. My wife and I, when we first got married, we were talking about moving to the East Bay. And my thing was, when you move to the East Bay from the city, you move to the town, which is Oakland. She didn't want to move to Oakland. She wanted to move to San Leandro. And I'd asked her, why do you want to move to San Leandro? It's because my mother was already living out here. Her and my mother are really close. So she wanted to move to San Leandro. And I was just like, okay, whatever you want, why not? Let's go, no biggie. But we was on the East 14th side, 164th. I felt it was quiet. The building that we moved in was super quiet. Like, there was no noise whatsoever. I mean, even in the daytime, it could be a Saturday and you would hear nothing. Until 3 weeks later, I had a little birthday party or a gathering at the apartment, and my friends from the city came over. And we were walking to the store, and right when they got me outside, we had this thing that whoever's birthday we just give them the business, right? That's just how we did it. Before we even crossed the street to go to the store, about 4 to 5 police cars pulled up. A combination of the sheriff's department and the highway patrol. We was asking one of the officers as we were on the car, we was like, man, what's going on? And they said, well, somebody called in and said there was a gang fight. We was like, no, it was my partner's, it's my birthday. You know what I mean? They just, gave me the business when we was outside, that was it. And then they kind of, shrugged it off and then left. And we was like, man, what did I just move to? And then I ended up getting kicked out that apartment like that same night because of the noise. But we stayed in San Leandro I think we got that apartment. Then we moved to 167th and got an apartment there. I think we were in that apartment a month, and then my house, the apartment got broken into, and we moved to another apartment in the building that had less windows, and I wasn't getting along with the building manager, so our jobs ended up moving us to Oakland because we both worked in Oakland. Before we even moved to Oakland, I think my wife was working in San Leandro for a kids' clothing store, and I was working at Bayfair Mall. And I was working in the food court at about like 8 of those different food stations, because 2 two owners owned about 8 or 9 of those. They owned like 75% of the things in there. So I worked there, and then I worked at Burger King for a minute, and then I worked at, they just had built a brand new Arby's in 1990, and I worked at Arby's. So that was the first time I've ever worked fast food. And then my wife ended up getting a job in Oakland, and then I ended up working for a TV station in Oakland. So after San Leandro, we went to Oakland. My daughter was born in Oakland, July 1992. And then about 6 or 7 months later, my wife wanted to move back to San Leandro. So she was like, I'm going back to San Leandro whether you like it or not. And she moved back to San Leandro, and I followed her back, and we moved into the same apartment buildings that my mother was living in. And a matter of fact, we lived right next door to my mom, which was great. Babysitter, we going somewhere. It's your granddaughter, see you in a minute. After she got about 4 or 5, we had her in a Head Start program that was in Oakland. Because me going to work, I could drop her off and keep it moving. And my wife, although she was going to Western Career College out here, she was still working in Oakland. So we stayed out here, I think, till my daughter was probably about 3 or 4. And then once she joined the Head Start program, we ended up moving to an apartment back in Oakland. So 2010, my daughter graduated high school and went off to Sac State. And then we moved to San Leandro right before my son's 13th birthday party. When we stayed on the East 14th side, the only thing I knew was Bayfair Mall, the BART station, and everything on that side. I never really ventured on the, I call it the greenhouse side of San Leandro, or the San Leandro, San Lorenzo side. And it was equally as quiet. And it was more neighborhoodish on that side of San Leandro versus the streets that we stayed on were more so apartment buildings than houses. And when we moved back, it was more so houses than apartment buildings. So it was great, and we were right around the corner from Arroyo High School, so I can literally hear the school bell, over my fence. So we were that close, and this side was great because it was a lot more shopping on this side. We were close to the marina. The marina was, basically around the corner. Like, my wife and I used to take walks all the time to the marina, and that was great because the trail was right down the street. So it was just beautiful being on this side, close to the water. We used to sit in the backyard and just watch planes land. And that was one of our things. Or we'll go to the marina, walk down to the marina, sit on the bench, and do the exact same thing. So it was great. We got stuff out here. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those towns where nothing's too far away. Everything to me is up the block. There's San Leandro High School, there's Arroyo and San Lorenzo High School, which were, I've, did career days at all 3 of them. You know what I mean? So it's just a real nice city to live in. Back in the 60s, I think the population was like 60,000, and they had between 7 and 15 African Americans, or back in the days, blacks or Negroes, living in the city. And could you imagine a city of 60,000 people with only 15 of us? I can't imagine what would that be like, leaving your house, walking down the street, and where all these people looking at you like, they're looking at you basically like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Like, you're a resident, but they're looking at you as a visitor. You know what I mean? And then I think Brian Copeland, a comedian who also wrote a book, and he was talking about his trials and tribulations in San Leandro, and just like listening to him, I was like, man, was it really like that? You know what I mean? Him going to school out here, and the whole nine, and then coming to where it was kind of that shift was really cool. You know what I mean? It was just like, you're seeing, like, my neighbors are all diverse now. Like a Latino family living on one side, and I had an Asian family living on the other side of me, and then it just stair-step down the block like that. So it was like the whole block was diverse, and it was cool. Going to my son's school, it was like super diverse. I was a public address announcer for his football team for the first 2 years he played. you know, and it was welcoming. It's really really a good and diverse city. You know, it's small enough to be kind of considered a small town, but I think the population now is probably about 80,000. But there's so much going on in San Leandro, you know, with the farmers markets, and, you know, they have the Cherry Festival, and, you know, they got, you know, this great library out here. They got a couple of great libraries out here, a ton of food out here. There's things to do out here. Your Bayfair Mall has a theater. So, I mean, and I think I was on the forefront of like watching a lot of that stuff built. Andrew, a lot of my friends live out here, and I always convince people, you know, if you don't want to live in Oakland, then, you know, move to San Leandro, which is like right next door. And I believe this comedian had a joke that said San Leandro was Spanish for the rest of Oakland. Because once you cross the border at like 106th or 107th, you're in San Leandro. You know what I mean? And it goes from International back to East 14th Street. So yeah, it's nice. It's a real nice city to live in. I'm James C. Earl Rockefeller III, and I am a proud resident of San Leandro, California.